I used to believe that trust was the foundation of love. Without it, everything else collapses. My name is Marissa. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how the man I thought I would marry taught me the sharpest truth about betrayal. I met Eric at a friend's housewarming party. It was one of those nights when you don't expect much, just polite small talk, a glass of wine, and maybe a story to laugh about later. But then he found me. We talked for hours, as if we had known each other all our lives. From that night forward, he was woven into my every day. Coffee dates turned into dinners, dinners into weekend trips, and before long we were inseparable. 3 years passed like that, steady and sure. By the second year, I was practically living at his place. My toothbrush sat beside his, my clothes filled half his closet, and yet I never felt like I was intruding. His space felt like ours. What I loved most about him was his openness. He didn't hide his past, his mistakes, or even the parts of his family life that embarrassed him. I thought that kind of honesty was rare, precious. He even told me about a childhood friend of his, a woman he swore was like a sister. He laughed when I asked if there had ever been something more between them, and assured me with disarming ease that there hadn't. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He gave me no reason not to. When he proposed, I said yes, without hesitation. We started dreaming about the wedding honeymoon plans and what kind of home we'd want. I was all in emotionally, financially, spiritually. I thought the universe had finally given me my forever, but the truth was crouching in shadows I didn't see. One Friday night, he arrived at my apartment with his weekend bag just like always. We cooked dinner together, laughed about nothing, and curled up to watch a movie. He fell asleep with his head on my shoulder, and I remember smiling as I brushed my fingers through his hair, feeling lucky. But then his phone lit up on the coffee table. Once, twice, then again, and again. Silent notifications. At first I ignored it, group chats, I told myself. But the words that flashed on the lock screen weren't friendly. They were intimate, flirty, and they were from her, the childhood friend. My stomach twisted. We had each other's passwords, a gesture of trust we had agreed on long ago. My hand shook as I typed in his code. I told myself I was overreacting, that I'd unlock it and feel foolish for doubting him. But the moment the screen opened, my world collapsed. There they were. Message after message, plans to meet, heart emojis, secrets. One message from him read, "I can't wait to see you tomorrow." And her reply, "We're good to go? He thinks I'll be with family." It was like the air left the room. I stared at him sleeping peacefully beside me, and in that moment I couldn't tell which hurt more, the lies written on that screen or the serenity on his face as if betraying me cost him nothing. I didn't wake him. I didn't scream. I just sat there with the phone in my hands, my body shaking, asking myself over and over, was I not enough? When did he stop choosing me? How long had I been the fool, building a future on lies? The next morning, he kissed me on the cheek, packed his bag, and pretended nothing was wrong. He told me he was going to visit his parents. I followed our usual routine, walking him to the door. And when he turned, expecting my smile and a soft goodbye, I looked him in the eye and said, "Good luck on your date." The blood drained from his face. For a split second, he couldn't mask it. Panic, guilt, shame, all flashing at once. Then he tried to recover, stammering, asking what I meant. But I didn't let him. I simply closed the door. He knocked. He begged. My phone buzzed with desperate messages. It didn't mean anything. "Please let me explain. I'll cut her off. I'll do anything." I sat in silence, staring at the screen as tears blurred my vision. None of it mattered. Because if it truly meant nothing, why had he lied? Why had he hidden it beneath stories of family visits? That was the night everything I thought I knew about love shattered. He came back the next day, standing outside my apartment door with flowers in one hand and his phone in the other, as if a cheap bouquet and a string of apologies could erase the cracks he had carved into me. I watched him through the peephole for nearly 10 minutes. He shifted from foot to foot, knocked, called my name, whispered promises to the closed door. At one point I heard him say, "She means nothing, Marissa. You're the one I want." But the problem wasn't her, it was him. When I finally opened the door, It wasn't because I wanted him back. It was because I needed to see his face. When I told him what he had done to me, he looked relieved when the door creaked open, his mouth curling into that familiar smile I used to fall into so easily. But my expression must have told him otherwise, because the smile faded almost immediately. I let him talk. I let him pour out excuses, explanations, frantic apologies. He swore it was only messages that they had kissed once, but it didn't go further, that he was confused, that he was lonely when I was busy, that he never wanted to lose me. Each word was another knife twist, because what he didn't understand was that betrayal isn't measured in distance or in flesh, it's measured in intention. And his intention had been to deceive me, to let another woman into the sacred space that was supposed to belong only to us. I asked him when it started. His eyes darted, his voice cracked, and I knew before he even answered that it had been going on far longer than he admitted. Months, maybe years. The trust I thought we shared wasn't shattered in a single night, it had been eroding quietly like a foundation crumbling beneath a house, until one day the walls just collapse. He cried. He actually cried. And for a moment, my heart betrayed me too, remembering the man who once held me as if I were the center of his universe. But then I remembered those messages, the ease with which he had typed them, the joy he carried in the secrecy. I remembered the panic on his face when I said, "Good luck on your date." That panic wasn't about losing me, it was about being caught. So I told him to leave. He didn't accept it. For weeks, he kept coming back, sending letters, calling my friends to plead on his behalf, begging my family to convince me. He even confessed to my mother, hoping her forgiveness would sway me. But what he didn't realize was that forgiveness wasn't hers to give. It was mine, and I no longer had it in me. I started seeing everything clearly then. The nights he stayed late at work, the weekends he said he was with his family, the sudden need for privacy with his phone. All the puzzle pieces I ignored snapped together into a picture that made me sick. He had been living a double life right under my nose, and I had been blind because I loved him too much to see the truth. I wasn't just grieving the loss of him, I was grieving the loss of myself. The version of me that believed in him, that believed in us. The woman who daydreamed about wedding dresses and children and vacations we'd never take. She was gone, and all that was left was the hollow ache of betrayal. But sometimes pain has a way of forcing growth. I began to write again, something I hadn't done in years. Late nights filled with tears turned into pages of raw reflection. The more I poured myself into words, the lighter I felt, as if I was stitching myself back together thread by thread. Meanwhile, Eric's life unraveled. That childhood friend he betrayed me with, she ghosted him. I know because he admitted it in one of his desperate messages. She blocked him, cut him off, left him humiliated. He lost me, and in the end, he didn't even have her. Karma, I thought. Sweet, bitter karma. The silence after cutting him off was the hardest part. For years, my life had been entwined with his. Our routines, our inside jokes, our late-night conversations. Now my days felt hollow, like a house stripped of furniture. But as the quiet stretched, something unexpected happened. I started hearing myself again. At first, it was painful. My own thoughts were heavy, replaying moments I wished I could erase. I remembered the way he used to lace his fingers through mine when crossing the street. How he whispered plans for our future on Sunday mornings. The way his hand rested on the small of my back, as if to say, "I've got you." Those memories cut deeper than his betrayal, because they reminded me of how much I had given, how much I had believed. But the more I sat with my grief, the more I realized it was changing shape. It wasn't just loss, it was awakening. For so long I had defined myself through him, through us, that I forgot what it meant to stand on my own. Now stripped of the illusion, I was left with nothing but myself. And strangely, that became enough. I poured myself into rebuilding. I picked up overtime at work, not because I needed the money, but because it gave me purpose again. I redecorated my apartment, tearing down the reminders of him and replacing them with colors that felt like me. Deep blues, warm yellows, plants climbing toward the sun. I traveled, even if only small weekend trips, letting new places remind me that the world was larger than my heartbreak. And yet he still lingered. Eric kept trying to claw his way back. Emails, handwritten letters slipped under my door, even waiting outside my office one night with a speech rehearsed like some tragic play. He said he was broken without me, that he couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, that losing me had taught him he couldn't live without my love. I almost believed him, until I looked closer. His words weren't about me, they were about him, about his emptiness, his loneliness, his desperation. It wasn't love, it was need. He wanted me back, not because he cherished me, but because I had been the safety net he never thought he'd lose. The final straw came when I learned he had been spinning a story to our mutual friends, that I had overreacted, that it had been just messages, that I was too unforgiving. He turned my pain into gossip, twisting it so he could look like the victim. When I heard those words, the anger I had buried came rushing back. I confronted him one last time, not with screaming or tears, but with clarity. I told him I knew who he was now, that I refused to be painted as the villain in the story of my own heartbreak. I told him he no longer had the power to break me because I wasn't his to break anymore. That night, I blocked him on everything. No more messages, no more letters, no more openings for him to crawl back through. For the first time, the silence was mine, and it felt like peace. What I didn't expect was what came after. Whispers reached me through mutual friends. The childhood friend he betrayed me with had turned her back on him completely. His reputation, once polished, was now tainted by rumors of his unfaithfulness. Work opportunities dried up. He was left alone, scrambling to rebuild a life he had shattered with his own hands. And me, I was standing taller than ever. Months passed, and with them came clarity I hadn't known I needed. At first, I thought revenge would be the sweetness I craved, that seeing Eric lose everything would heal me. And in some ways it did. Every story I heard of his life unraveling felt like a small repayment for the nights I cried myself to sleep. But as time stretched on, I realized my healing wasn't rooted in his downfall, it was rooted in my rise. I had changed. The woman who once clung to his every word was gone. In her place was someone who no longer waited for love to validate her worth. I built a routine that was mine alone. Morning jogs along the river, evenings with books stacked high beside me, weekends spent exploring places I had once said we'd visit together. And each moment whispered the same truth: I didn't need him to feel complete. Still, life has a cruel way of circling back. One evening after dinner with a friend, I stepped outside to find him waiting by my car. He looked thinner, older, as though the weight of his choices had carved lines into his face. His voice cracked when he said my name. He told me he was sorry again. This time there were no flowers, no rehearsed speeches, just raw desperation. He admitted the other woman had cut him off months ago, that he was lonely, that he missed me every single day. He even said he still dreamed about our wedding, about the life we had once planned together. I listened. Not out of hope, but out of closure. And when he asked if there was even the smallest chance for us, I felt something unexpected: pity. Not for the man who hurt me, but for the man who would never understand what he had thrown away. I told him no. Gently, firmly, without anger. I told him that trust is not something you can glue back together after you've crushed it under your heel. That love once betrayed doesn't grow back the same, it becomes a scar. And I had carried enough scars already. He cried right there in the parking lot, his hands trembling as he begged. But for the first time, I wasn't the one on the floor picking up the pieces. I walked away, my keys jingling softly in my hand, my heart steady. His sobs followed me into the night, but they no longer chained me. Driving home, I realized the real victory wasn't that he had lost me, it was that I had found myself. He had taken my trust, my dreams, my years, but he hadn't taken my ability to rebuild. Now when people ask me if I regret loving him, I say no, because even betrayal has its lessons. I learned that love without respect is hollow. I learned that trust once broken cannot be begged back into existence. And most of all, I learned that sometimes the greatest act of revenge is not destroying the person who hurt you, it's becoming someone they can never hurt again. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, do you think betrayal should ever be forgiven? Or are some wounds too deep to heal? I want to hear your thoughts.